David Carter knew he was going to die. The transport ship had stopped responding to his commands 10 minutes ago, and now it was spinning out of control through empty space. Red lights flashed everywhere. The computer kept screaming warnings that nobody could hear except him. He pulled hard on the controls, but nothing worked. The moon's surface was getting closer and closer through the cracked window. David closed his eyes and hoped it would be quick. The crash was not quick. Metal screamed as the ship tore apart. David felt his body thrown against the straps, felt something snap in his leg, felt pain like fire. Then everything went black. When he woke up, he wished he hadn't. His right leg was crushed under a piece of the ship's wall. Blood covered his suit. The oxygen meter on his wrist showed red. 6 hours of air left, maybe less. The emergency beacon was smashed. His radio was dead. Nobody knew where he was. David tried to move the metal off his leg, but it was too heavy. He tried 3 times until the pain made him stop. There was no point. He was alone on an empty moon, millions of miles from the nearest human outpost. This was where he would die. Hours passed. The sun rose over the rocky ground, then set again. David drifted in and out of sleep. His oxygen meter kept beeping. 4 hours. 3 hours. 2 hours. Then he saw movement. At first, David thought his dying brain was playing tricks on him. But no, something was there. A figure, walking slowly toward the crashed ship. It stopped about 20 feet away and just stared at him. David tried to focus his eyes. It was not human. The creature had blue-gray skin and stood on 2 legs like a person, but its face was different. Large dark eyes, no nose like humans had, and a small mouth. It wore dirty gray clothes that looked like prison uniforms. Strange symbols were marked on the sleeve. The creature looked at David for a long time. Then it looked around nervously, as if checking to see if anyone was watching. Finally, it came closer. David wanted to speak, but his throat was too dry. The creature knelt down beside him and examined his crushed leg. It made soft clicking sounds, then stood up and ran away. David closed his eyes. Even the alien had abandoned him. His oxygen meter showed 1 hour left. But the creature came back. It carried tools and a strange device that looked like a medical scanner. Working carefully, it started to lift the metal off David's leg. The pain was terrible, but David bit down and stayed quiet. The alien worked for almost an hour, using rocks as levers, until finally David's leg was free. The alien pulled David out of the wreckage and dragged him across the rocky ground to a cave entrance hidden behind large boulders. Inside, the cave went deep into the moon's surface. The alien had made a small camp there with blankets, food containers, and a light that glowed soft blue. Over the next few days, David learned that his rescuer was called Thale. Communication was hard at first. Thale spoke in clicks and whistles that David could not understand. But David managed to fix his small translation device, and slowly they began to talk. Thale explained that his people were called the Velshir. They had lived on a beautiful planet once, but that was before the Carthans came. The Carthan Empire had conquered the Velshir world 200 years ago. Now all Velshir were slaves, working in mines and factories across the empire. Thale had escaped from a mining facility on this moon 3 months ago and was hiding in the caves. "Why help me?" David asked one night, his leg wrapped in bandages Thale had made. "You could have let me die. It would have been safer for you." Thale was quiet for a moment. The translator crackled as he spoke. "My people have suffered much. We have seen much cruelty. But I remember my mother's words before the Carthans took her. She said we must not become like those who hurt us. We must stay good inside, even when the world is bad. You were dying. I could help. So I must help." 3 weeks passed. David's leg healed slowly. Together, they repaired his emergency beacon using parts from the crashed ship. When it was ready, David looked at Thale. "When I activate this, my people will come for me. But the Carthans will see it too. They will find you." Thale nodded slowly. "I know. But you must go home. Activate it." The beacon sent its signal into space. Within 6 hours, a human rescue ship appeared in the sky. But so did a Carthan patrol vessel. David watched from the cave entrance as Carthan soldiers landed. They were large, wearing black armor, carrying weapons. They grabbed Thale and threw him to the ground. One soldier kicked him hard in the stomach. Another hit him with the weapon. As the human ship landed, David ran toward Thale. The Carthan soldiers blocked his path. Behind them, Thale looked up, blood running from his mouth. Their eyes met. Thale was not asking to be saved. He was asking David to remember this moment. To remember what happened here. David would never forget. David Carter stood in the center of the massive council chamber on Earth. 200 representatives from every human colony sat in curved rows around him, waiting. Above their heads, holographic screens floated in the air, ready to display whatever evidence he would show them. His hands were shaking. He had never spoken to so many important people before. He was just an engineer, a man who fixed machines and delivered supplies. But now he had to convince these leaders to do something that could change everything. 6 weeks ago, I crashed on an uncharted moon in the outer reach, David began. His voice echoed in the huge room. I was dying. My oxygen was running out. No one knew where I was. I had maybe an hour left to live. He pressed a button on his datapad. The holographic screens came to life, showing images of the crashed ship, the barren moon, and then Thale's face. This is Thale. He is one of the Velshire people. He found me dying in my wrecked ship and saved my life. David's voice grew stronger. He dragged me to safety. He bandaged my wounds. He shared his food and water with me for 3 weeks. And he did all of this even though helping me put his own life in terrible danger. The council members leaned forward, watching the screens. David showed them more images. Velshire slaves working in dark mines. Children with chains on their ankles. Bodies lying in piles outside factory walls. The screens showed the symbols burned into Velshire skin, marking them as property of the Carthan Empire. The Carthans conquered the Velshire 200 years ago, David continued. Since then, every Velshire has been a slave. They work until they die. If they refuse, they are killed. If they try to escape, they are killed. If they help someone the Carthans do not approve of, they are killed. He showed the final video. The rescue. Carthan soldiers dragging Thale away, beating him while David watched helplessly. Thale knew what would happen if he helped me. He knew the Carthans would find out. He knew they would punish him. But he helped me anyway, because it was the right thing to do. David looked around the chamber. Now I am asking you, what is the right thing for us to do? The chamber erupted in voices. Some council members were angry, some were crying, some were already arguing with each other. Councillor Richard Stone stood up. He was an older man with grey hair and expensive clothes. Mr. Carter, your story is moving. Truly. But we have laws. The non-interference directive states that we cannot interfere with established empires, even if we disagree with their practices. The Carthan Empire has existed for over 500 years. They control 40 star systems. If we attack them, we could start a war that kills millions of humans. Other council members nodded. We must think of our own people first, one woman said. We cannot risk human lives for aliens. David felt anger rising in his chest. So we do nothing? We just let them suffer? It is not our problem, Stone replied coldly. Then Admiral Rebecca Hayes stood up. She was the head of Earth's defense fleet, a tall woman with short black hair and sharp eyes. Actually, Councillor Stone, it is our problem. She activated her own datapad. New images appeared on the screens. These were intercepted Carthan communications, pages of text in alien writing with human translations below. Our intelligence teams captured these transmissions last week, Admiral Hayes said. The Carthan Empire has been mapping human territory. They have been studying our defenses. And they have been making lists. The screens showed documents titled Subject Species Evaluation. One page had images of humans with notes beside them. David could read some of the translated words: suitable for labor. Moderate resistance expected. Conquest timeline, 5 years. The council chamber went completely silent. They are planning to enslave us, Admiral Hayes said quietly. Just like they enslaved the Velshire. Just like they enslaved a dozen other species. We are next on their list. Councillor Stone sat down heavily. His face had gone pale. A younger councillor named Margaret Foster stood up. Then we have no choice. We must act first. But even if we did not need to protect ourselves, I would still vote to help the Velshire. Mr. Carter is right. One of them saved one of us. They showed us what true courage looks like. What does it say about humanity if we turn our backs on that? Hear, hear, several other council members shouted. Thomas Grant, the eldest member of the council, rose slowly to his feet. Everyone respected him. He had been a councillor for 40 years. When he spoke, people listened. I am old, Thomas said. I have seen humanity at its best and its worst. I have seen us be kind and I have seen us be cruel. Today we get to choose which we will be. He looked directly at David. Mr. Carter, you asked us what the right thing to do is. I believe you already know the answer. You came here hoping we would be brave enough to do it. Thomas turned to face the entire council. Thales saved one human life when he had every reason to hate all outsiders. He showed mercy to a stranger when his entire existence had been suffering. That one act of kindness must be answered. I propose we help the Velshir and all slaves of the Carthan Empire. Not just because it protects us, though it does, but because it is right. If they saved one of us, then we must answer for all of them. I second the proposal, Admiral Hayes said immediately. All in favor? Thomas called out. Hands rose across the chamber. One by one, then in groups, then all at once. Even Councillor Stone raised his hand, though he looked unhappy about it. The motion passes, Thomas declared. Humanity goes to war. David felt his legs go weak with relief. He had done it. Thales' sacrifice would not be forgotten. Admiral Hayes walked over to him as the council members filed out, already making plans. Mr. Carter, I want you on my team. We are going to need someone who understands the Velshir. Someone they will trust. Will you help us? David thought of Thales' face, covered in blood but still trying to smile. Yes. Whatever it takes. Good. We have a lot of work to do. Come with me. As they left the chamber, David looked back at the screen still showing Thales' image. Hold on, he whispered. We are coming. 6 months had passed since the council vote. 6 months of planning, building, and preparing. Now Admiral Rebecca Hayes stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Resolute, and watched her fleet move through the darkness of space like ghosts. Status report, she said calmly. Commander James Mitchell checked his screens. All 20 ships are in position, Admiral. Stealth systems are holding. The Carthans have no idea we are here. Rebecca nodded. The human fleet had traveled deep into Carthan territory without being detected. Each ship was wrapped in new technology that bent light and radar around them, making them invisible. It had cost billions to develop, but it was worth it. Beside Rebecca stood David Carter. He was no longer just an engineer. For 6 months, he had worked with the military, teaching them everything he knew about the Velshir and the Carthans. Now he wore a civilian advisor uniform and carried a datapad with the faces of every Velshir they hoped to save. Nervous? Rebecca asked him quietly. Terrified, David admitted. What if we are too late? What if Thale is already dead? Then we save the others, Rebecca said firmly. And we make sure his sacrifice meant something. Are you ready? David took a deep breath. Ready. Rebecca pressed the communication button that connected her to every ship in the fleet and every soldier waiting for orders. This is Admiral Hayes. Operation Thale's debt begins now. All teams, execute. Across 12 different locations in Carthan space, human special forces moved into action simultaneously. They had been secretly positioned for weeks, waiting for this moment. At Labor Facility 7, Captain Michael Wright led his team through the dark corridors. They moved silently, using weapons that fired electric pulses instead of bullets. Carthan guards fell unconscious before they could raise an alarm. Within 10 minutes, Michael's team had reached the main holding cells. He pressed the door controls, and the massive metal doors slid open. Inside, hundreds of Velshir prisoners looked up in fear and confusion. They cowered against the walls, expecting more punishment. Michael removed his helmet so they could see his human face. We are not Carthans, he said slowly. His translator device changed his words into the Velshir language. We are humans. We have come to help you. An old Velshir woman with scars covering her arms stepped forward. Lies. No one helps slaves. This is a trick. Michael understood her fear. These people had known only cruelty for their entire lives. Why would they trust armed strangers? Then every screen in the facility lit up. David's face appeared, speaking in carefully practiced Velshir words. My name is David Carter. 6 months ago, I crashed on a moon and was dying. One of your people found me. His name was Thale. He had every reason to let me die, but instead he saved my life. He shared his food with me. He healed my wounds. He risked everything to help a stranger. The Velshir in the facility went completely silent. Some of them knew Thale's name. Some of them had heard rumors of the slave who had helped an alien. David's voice grew stronger. Thale taught me that kindness can exist even in the darkest places. Because of him, my people have come here. We have come to repay the debt we owe. We have come to save you all. The old Velshir woman's legs gave out. She fell to her knees and began to cry. Around the facility, others started crying too. Some collapsed. Some reached out toward the screens as if they could touch David through them. "Please," the woman whispered. "Please tell me this is real." Michael knelt beside her. "It is real. Take my hand. We are leaving this place." The same scene was happening at 11 other facilities. Thousands of Velshire slaves were being freed, seeing hope for the first time in their lives. But the Carthan Empire was not blind. Their military systems detected the attacks within minutes. Admiral Voss, commander of the Carthan War Fleet, immediately sent orders to every ship under his command. "Unknown forces are attacking our labor facilities," he announced. "All vessels converge on Sector 7. We will crush these invaders and remind the galaxy why the Carthan Empire is feared." 200 Carthan warships began moving toward the human fleet. They were massive vessels, each one 3 times larger than any human ship. They had weapons that could destroy planets and armor that had never been broken in 500 years of war. Admiral Voss smiled as he watched the enemy fleet on his screens. "They are so few. This will be a short battle." On the Resolute, Rebecca watched the Carthan fleet approaching. Commander Mitchell looked worried. "Admiral, they outnumber us 10 to 1. Should we retreat?" Rebecca smiled, but it was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had planned for exactly this moment. "No, Commander. Let them come. They think our stealth fleet is the real attack." "It is not?" Mitchell asked, confused. "No," Rebecca said quietly. "The stealth fleet is bait. The real weapon has been in place for months. They just do not know it yet." She pressed a button on her console. The signal traveled across space at light speed, reaching teams that had been hiding on Carthan worlds for half a year. In the capital city of the Carthan homeworld, a human cyber warfare specialist named Sarah Chen received the signal. She and her team had infiltrated the planet months ago, disguised as traders. They had spent every day secretly installing programs into the Carthan computer networks. "Signal received," Sarah said to her team. "Activate all protocols. Now." Across the entire Carthan Empire, chaos erupted in the same instant. Every slave collar on every Velshire neck suddenly deactivated and fell off. Every prison door in every facility opened. Every Carthan military computer began deleting its own files. Weapons that humanity had secretly smuggled to rebel groups over the past months suddenly powered on and were ready to use. Admiral Voss stared at his screens in horror as red warning lights filled his ship. "What is happening?" "Report." "Admiral, we have lost control of all planetary systems," an officer shouted. "The slave facilities are opening. The prisons are opening. Our weapons databases are corrupted. Communications are failing across the Empire." On 40 different worlds, enslaved species rose up in rebellion. The Velshire were not alone. The Carthans had enslaved many races, and now they were all fighting back at once. Voss watched his empire begin to crumble in real time. How? How did they do this? On the Resolute, Rebecca spoke calmly into the communication system. Her words were broadcast to every Carthan ship, every Carthan planet, every Carthan leader. "You built your empire on the suffering of innocence. You thought you were untouchable. You thought no one would stand against you." She paused. "You were wrong. One of your slaves showed mercy to one of us. Now we show judgment to all of you." Admiral Voss realized the truth too late. The human fleet had never been the real attack. While the Carthans were busy building bigger ships and more weapons, humanity had been quietly dismantling their empire from the inside. "Retreat," Voss ordered desperately. "All ships, return to your home systems. Protect the planets." But it was already too late. The judgment had begun. On Labor Facility 7, Michael Wright helped the last of the Velshire prisoners onto the transport ships. The old woman held his hand tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for remembering us." "We will never forget," Michael promised. As the human ships carrying freed slaves jumped into hyperspace, heading toward safety, David looked out at the stars and thought of Thale. "We kept our promise," he said quietly. "Now we finish this." Emperor Draxus sat on his golden throne, confident and comfortable. He had ruled the Carthan Empire for 30 years. His father had ruled before him, and his grandfather before that. For 500 years, the Carthan bloodline had controlled 40 star systems and billions of slaves. Nothing could threaten that power. Then every screen in the throne room turned on at once. A human woman appeared on all of them. She wore a military uniform and her eyes were cold as ice. "Emperor Draxus of the Carthan Empire. I am Admiral Rebecca Hayes of the United Humanity Fleet. We have a message for you." Draxus laughed. Humans? You dare speak to me in my own palace? Guards, shut this down. But the guards could not shut it down. The screens showed the same image no matter what buttons they pressed. The Admiral's face was on every display in the palace, and according to the frantic reports coming in, on every screen across the entire empire. For 2 centuries, you have enslaved the Velshire people, Admiral Hayes continued. You have worked them to death in your mines and factories. You have beaten them, starved them, and killed them for no reason except that you could. You thought you were powerful. You thought you were untouchable. I am untouchable. Draxus shouted at the screen. I command 200 warships. I control entire worlds. What can you possibly do to me? The Admiral's expression did not change. 6 months ago, one of your slaves saved the life of a human engineer. His name was Thale. He had suffered under your cruelty his entire life, yet when he found a stranger dying, he chose compassion. He risked everything to help someone he had never met. Draxus waved his hand dismissively. One slave means nothing. That one slave meant everything, Admiral Hayes said quietly. Because of Thale's kindness, humanity has learned what your empire truly is. We have seen your crimes. We have witnessed your cruelty. And we have decided that it ends today. You cannot end the Carthan Empire. Draxus was no longer laughing. We are too strong. We have ruled for 500 years. Not anymore. Admiral Hayes pressed a button on her console. Watch. The screens changed. Now they showed images from across the empire. At first, Draxus did not understand what he was seeing. Then the truth hit him like a physical blow. Every slave collar in the empire had deactivated. Millions of them, all at once. Velshire slaves were removing the collars from their necks and staring at them in disbelief. On the mining worlds, in the factory cities, on every planet the Carthans controlled, the slaves were realizing they were no longer locked in chains. Prison doors were opening everywhere. Not just Velshire prisons, but facilities holding more anti-rebels, Kalish resistance fighters, and a dozen other enslaved species. They were all walking free. Carthan military bases showed soldiers running in confusion. Their computers were not working. Their weapon systems were offline. Their communications were filled with static. What have you done? Draxus whispered in horror. We have freed them, Admiral Hayes answered. While you focused on building bigger weapons and more warships, humanity sent cyber warfare teams into your systems. For 6 months, they have been installing programs, creating backdoors, and preparing for this moment. Every computer in your empire, every lock, every weapon, every database is under our control now. Draxus tried to call his military commanders, but his communication system was dead. He tried to activate the palace defense systems, but nothing responded. He was trapped in his own throne room, helpless. The screens showed more images. On 40 different worlds, the enslaved peoples were rising up in rebellion. The Velshire were arming themselves with weapons that had mysteriously appeared in their hiding places. The Moranti were storming government buildings. The Kalish were taking control of spaceports. Most shocking of all, Carthan soldiers were not fighting back. Many of them were watching the screens in the streets, seeing for the first time the true history of their empire. Admiral Hayes had broadcast every crime, every atrocity, every secret murder that the Carthan rulers had committed over 500 years. The evidence was undeniable. On the planet Kelvar, a Carthan military commander named General Vex watched the broadcasts and felt sick. He had believed he was serving a great empire, protecting civilization, maintaining order. Now he saw the truth. His empire was built on torture and genocide. When his second-in-command asked for orders to fire on the rebels, General Vex said quietly, "No. Lower your weapons. We will not fight for this anymore." Across the empire, other commanders made the same choice. Some Carthan soldiers kept fighting, loyal to the old ways. But most simply stopped. They put down their weapons and walked away from the empire they had served. 3 days later, freed Velshire rebels broke into the imperial palace. Draxus had been abandoned by his guards. He stood alone in his throne room, still wearing his royal robes, refusing to accept reality. The rebels dragged him from his throne. He kicked and screamed like a child, demanding they release him, threatening punishments that he could no longer deliver. They brought him to a transport ship where David Carter was waiting. David had spent the last 3 days searching through freed prisoners, asking if anyone knew what had happened to Thale. So far, he had found no answers. Draxus looked at David with pure hatred. You are the one who started this. The human that the traitor saved." "Thale was not a traitor," David said calmly. He was a better person than you will ever be. He was property. Draxus spat. A slave. Worth nothing. David stepped closer to the Emperor. Thale was worth more than your entire empire. He had nothing, and he chose to give what little he had to save a stranger. You had everything, and all you gave was pain. That is why you lost. I demand a trial. Draxus shouted. I am an emperor. I have rights. You will have a trial, David said. But not from us. Your victims will judge you. The former emperor was taken to a transport filled with freed Velshir. They would take him to their homeworld, where he would face justice from the people he had enslaved. As the transport left, David stood at the window watching it go. Admiral Hayes walked up beside him. We did it, she said. The Carthan Empire has fallen. 40 worlds are free. David nodded, but he did not smile. Have we found Thale yet? Rebecca put her hand on his shoulder. Not yet. But we are still looking. We have freed over 1 million Velshir so far. There are still more facilities to search. He could be dead, David said quietly. He could be, Rebecca agreed. But until we know for certain, we keep looking. He saved you. The least we can do is try to save him. David looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, if he was still alive, Thale was free. The chains were gone. The empire that had enslaved him had fallen. We kept our promise, David said. We judged them for what they did. Now we just need to find him. We will, Rebecca promised. However long it takes. The search continued. 1 year had passed since the fall of the Carthan Empire. David Carter stood in the main square of New Velshir City on the Velshir homeworld. The planet was beautiful, with purple skies and silver trees that swayed in the gentle wind. For 200 years, the Velshir had not been allowed to return to their homeworld. The Carthans had kept it as a private retreat for their military officers. Now it belonged to its true people again. Thousands of Velshir filled the square today. They wore clean clothes in bright colors, not the gray prison uniforms they had worn for generations. Children ran and played without fear. Families held each other and cried tears of joy. Music played from speakers, traditional Velshir songs that had been forbidden under Carthan rule. David walked through the crowd, searching faces. He had been searching for a year. Every freed prisoner, every rescued slave, every Velshir who returned home, David checked their names against his list. He had found many survivors from the labor facilities. He had reunited families who thought their loved ones were dead. But he had not found the one person he was looking for. Maybe you should stop, Admiral Rebecca Hayes had told him last month. Maybe it is time to accept that he is gone. But David could not stop. He owed Thale everything. If there was even a chance he was alive, David had to find him. Today was the dedication ceremony for the memorial. The Velshir had built a monument in the center of their capital city to honor those who had died as slaves and to celebrate those who survived. Leaders from 20 different freed species had come to attend. Humans, Velshir, Moanti, Kalesh, and others stood together as equals. David had been asked to speak at the ceremony. He was nervous. What could he say that would matter? He was just one human who had been saved by one Velshir. He was not a hero. Thale was the hero. The ceremony began. A Velshir elder named Kessa stood at the podium and spoke about the dark years of slavery and the bright future ahead. A human diplomat talked about the new alliance between their peoples. A Moanti leader praised the courage of the rebels who had fought for freedom. Then it was David's turn. He walked to the podium and looked out at the crowd. So many faces, so much hope. He took a deep breath. 1 year ago, I crashed on a moon and was dying, David began. A Velshir slave found me. His name was Thale. He could have walked away. He could have let me die. No one would have blamed him. His entire life had been suffering. Why should he help a stranger? The crowd was silent, listening. But Thale chose kindness. He risked his life to save mine. He shared his food when he had almost nothing. He healed my wounds. He gave me hope when I had none. And because of that one act of compassion, everything changed. David's voice grew stronger. Thale showed humanity what true courage looks like. Not the courage to fight or destroy, but the courage to help someone even when the world tells you not to. Because of him, my people came here. Because of him, you are all free today. The crowd began to applaud, but David raised his hand. He was not finished. I have spent this entire year searching for Thale. I have checked every name, every face, every freed prisoner. I wanted to thank him. I wanted to tell him that his sacrifice meant something. That he changed the universe. David's voice cracked with emotion. But I cannot find him. So I will say this here, hoping somehow he can hear me. Thale, if you are alive, know that you are the reason we are all standing here today. You are the reason thousands of people have their freedom. You are a hero to 2 species and a dozen worlds. The crowd applauded loudly. Many were crying. David stepped down from the podium, feeling hollow inside. He had hoped that giving the speech would bring some closure, but it only made him miss Thale more. The memorial was unveiled. It was a beautiful statue carved from white stone. It showed a Velshire helping a human to their feet, their hands clasped together. The inscription at the base read, "One act of kindness, a universe changed." As the crowd gathered around the statue, taking pictures and crying, David walked away. He needed to be alone for a moment. He found a quiet spot under one of the silver trees and sat down, staring at the purple sky. It is beautiful, is it not? David turned around so fast he almost fell. An elderly Velshire stood behind him, leaning on a wooden cane. He was thin and scarred, with patches of gray in his blue skin. One of his legs was bent at an odd angle, clearly broken long ago and healed wrong. But his eyes were the same. Those large, dark, kind eyes. Thale? David whispered. The old Velshire smiled. "Hello, my friend." David could not speak. He just stared, tears running down his face. Then he jumped up and hugged Thale carefully, afraid the old Velshire might break. "You are alive," David said over and over. "You are alive." "I am alive," Thale confirmed, his voice weak but happy. "The Carthans kept me in a prison for 6 months. They beat me many times. They broke my leg. But I survived. When your people freed the prisons, I was there. I have been recovering in a hospital. I only heard today that you were looking for me." David pulled back and looked at his friend. Thale was old now, damaged, but alive. "I thought I would never see you again." "I thought the same," Thale said. "But here we are." They sat together under the silver tree, watching the celebration in the square. Thousands of people from different worlds, all free because of what had started between 2 strangers on a barren moon. "Did you ever imagine this?" David asked. "When you found me dying, did you ever think it would lead to all of this?" Thale was quiet for a moment. "No. I only thought to do what was right. My mother taught me to stay good even when the world is bad. I did not know that one small choice would echo across the stars." "One person can change everything," David said. "You proved that." "We proved it together," Thale corrected. "I saved you. You saved my people. That is what friends do." They sat in comfortable silence, watching children play in the square. Human children and Velshire children, running together, laughing together. A universe that had been divided by cruelty was now united by kindness. "What will you do now?" David asked. Thale smiled. "I will live. For the first time in my life, I am truly free. I will see my world rebuild. I will watch our children grow up without chains. That is enough." "Will you stay here, on the homeworld?" "For a while. But perhaps I will travel too. I would like to see Earth someday. I want to meet the people who answered one act of kindness with freedom for millions." David laughed. "They would love to meet you. You are famous, you know. There are songs about you. Children learn your name in school." Thale looked embarrassed. "I am no hero. I only helped a friend." "That is exactly what makes you a hero," David said. As the sun set over New Velshire City, the 2 friends sat together and watched the celebration continue. The statue in the square showed a Velshire and a human helping each other, and beneath that memorial, the real Velshire and the real human sat in peace. One act of kindness had changed a universe. And it all started because one slave looked at a dying stranger and chose compassion over fear. That choice had echoed across the stars, and the echo would never fade.